ancestors worked hard, and there wasn't much to spare. So if they wanted new clothes, they made them. It was just that simple. And their handwork often became heirlooms, handed down from generation to generation. Maybe life is easier today, and maybe we are in a bigger hurry, but we can still take time to create heirlooms, and that is time worth spending.
Heirlooms by Design with Sharon LoMonaco is sponsored by Capital Imports, your passport for fine lace, embroideries, and fabrics, by OmniGrid, the most accurate and versatile products for the quilter, artist, and craftsperson, and by Quilts Plus, your authorized Bernina dealer. Now, here's Sharon.
Hi, I'm Sharon LoMonaco. Thanks for joining me on Heirlooms by Design. Today we will explore some tips, tricks, and techniques for rotary cutting. You know, our grandmothers spent hours painstakingly cutting out their quilt pieces with a pair of scissors. Then all of those hundreds of tiny little squares and triangles were carefully pieced together by hand. Some of you may still be using this same cutting method. But times have changed. With our new tools, we can cut out a king or queen size quilt in just a matter of an hour or less. Sewing it together can take as little as a day using strip piecing techniques. With so many beautiful quilt designs available and so many beautiful fabrics in your quilt shops, let's not waste any more time. There are too many quilts waiting to be made, so let's get on the cutting edge of quilting with tips, tricks, and techniques for rotary cutting.
Sharon will be right back.
Let me begin by introducing you to some of our basic tools. We're going to be using the OmniGrid ruler, and this is marked off in inches, quarter inches, and eighths. And our rotary cutter. The rotary cutter has a safety on it, which we will retract when we're going to cut, and be sure to replace it when you're finished cutting. Also, when we're cutting with a rotary cutter and mat, we always must have a rotary cutting mat underneath, or you'll have some big problems on your table. Don't use one of those little cardboard cutting mats. That's not the right kind. You need a rotary cutting mat, and it will say OmniGrid on it, and will probably have this textured. Also, I have this neat carousel turning board underneath so that I can turn it around. This is by Hapco, and this is going to be really fun to use. We're going to begin with sewing a basic 4-patch. Now the first thing I'm going to do is take my fabric and put it right sides together. I'm going to cut both of these at the same time. I'm lining up my selvages, and we can see that it's a little bit uneven down here. So I've lined up my selvages, and now I'm going to fold it in half and line my fold on one of these lines that goes across the mat. Now with my rotary cutter, I'm going to just square off an edge, and I'm using the grid that's on the mat as to me it's a really important part of rotary cutting. Press down firmly, and there we've cut through our 4 layers. I'm going to begin by cutting 2.5-inch squares, and I just need to line up my 2.5-inch line from my OmniGrid ruler, hold it securely, and press down and cut. And you see how neatly and smoothly this cuts through several layers of fabric. You can cut through about 8 layers of fabric with this, and it makes cutting it cuts the cutting time down to nothing. Now I'm going to stitch these two together, so let's pull up the chair. I want to show you this sewing machine foot that I'm going to be using today. This is called a little foot, and this was designed by Lynn Graves. This particular one has my Bernina adapter on it. On the right side is a perfect 1/4-inch seam allowance. Now accuracy is very important, as you know, in piecing your quilts. On the left side is an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, which is the right size for doing those miniature quilts that are so popular. Also, we have our 1/4 inch marking in front of and behind the needle and right at the needle. And we can see through this real easily. And this is going to make achieving our 1/4 inch seam allowance very easy. So let's just put this on the machine. Now, because I placed my fabrics with the right sides together, they're ready to sew. And I'm just going to stitch the seam down. And I have lined this up with the outside edge of my presser foot, the edge of the fabric. And that's going to give me that perfect 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now we have our 1/4 inch seam allowance. We're going to open this up, and it looks just like 2 pieces of fabric sewn together. I'm going to quickly press our seam, and generally you just will press this to the dark side of the fabric. And now we're ready to cut it into squares. So let's move our other pieces. I like to use a little bit smaller ruler for this. We don't need quite such a large ruler. So I'm going to go to my next size down. And I'm lining this up so that I have my straight edge on one of the lines of this cutting mat. And the first thing I'm going to do is cut off the selvage. Now we want to cut this into 2.5 inch squares. And once we have a few of these cut, we'll go ahead and start piecing them together. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to turn them around, and we're going to sew them together, and we'll have a 4-patch. Now, because I've pressed the seam going towards the dark fabric, it's very easy to get these 2 seams to nest together. And then when we know that when we can feel that they are together in the middle, they're going to match beautifully. And again, be very certain that we have our 1/4 inch seam, and with the little foot it's real easy to do that. And here we have our 4-patch. Now, the way I'm going to press these seams, I like to reduce as much bulk as possible. So you can see that these 2 seams are going towards the dark. These 2 are going to go towards the light fabric. And we just split it open in the middle, split that bit of a seam allowance, give it a little press, and we have a real nice 4-patch. If you were going to continue this, perhaps in a border, now we could add the next piece. Be sure that we have our seams so that they're nesting in the middle, and you can feel that with your finger. And as you can see, we can just keep right on going, and this puts together quickly and easily these squares with a lot of accuracy.
Heirlooms by Design will return in a moment.
Now this is an example of another way that these 2.5 inch squares can be put together. This square is for a triple Irish chain quilt. This is one of the squares that it's made up of. This is the other square. And you see how nicely the seams butt together. They all join beautifully. And this pile that I have right here is the whole triple Irish chain ready to be sewn together. Now let me show you another technique where we're still just cutting squares. We're going to piece it slightly different. This is a little bit of Seminole. I've started with 3 fabrics that I wanted to have some nice contrast, and I've sewn them together in a strip, and I have pressed the seams all in one direction. Now I'm going to cut them. This time, again, we're going to just cut it straight. I'm having a 1-inch finished size here, so I want to cut my strips 1.5 inches. We'll just cut a few of these, and I'll show you how to place them so that they have the staggered effect of the Seminole patchwork. I think this is enough for you to get the idea. When we piece these, we will position them one down, and one down. And that's how they will be sewn together. And then this is the effect that we'll get with the strip that we make. This can be added to shirt cuffs, collars, the bottoms of skirts. There's a lot of different things that we can do with Seminole patchwork, and it's a lot of fun.
We'll be right back. This new product presentation with Hollis Turnbow is brought to you by Quilts Plus, the only complete source for all your quilting and other heirloom sewing supplies.
Well, I feel like I'm in the log cabin in the woods today, Hollis. You're going to tell us a little bit about these beautiful log cabin patterns that I see all around us?
Yes, I brought two examples of log cabin. You know, I think that log cabin still continues to be one of the most popular quilt patterns because of the ease and the beauty of it, and the designs and colors are absolutely endless. I brought 2 that are somewhat different, but they're still log cabins. Company in South Florida by the name of Log Cabin Quilts by Sister's Choice, and it is owned and operated by 4 sisters.
Oh, that's great.
What they do is make kits, and the kits are just wonderful because all the fabric has been washed and ironed and then cut, and they're kits for all sizes of quilts, placemats, crib quilts, all kinds of things that relate to log cabins. Beautifully coordinated fabrics. Kit is reasonably priced when you consider the price of fabric today and the fact that it's all washed and cut into strips and ironed for you. So it really is a good buy.
It certainly
Log
is.
Cabin Quilts by Sister's Choice. And then another log cabin, very different. An acquaintance of mine by the name of Donna McConnell out at Searcy, Arkansas, has done a whole series of miniature log cabins. Log cabin in the center, all 1/4-inch logs combined with beautiful machine applique, prairie points, nice, very precise things. Donna has about, probably 8, 10, 12 patterns, all in a miniature size from about 12 to 18 inches up to about 24 to 36 inches.
Well, this is certainly some wonderful work, and absolutely beautiful machine applique.
It really is. Donna's work is certainly a piece of art because it's small and just the right size for some people who don't have a need for a large log cabin quilt, but just exquisite kind of work. Log cabin, very popular, continue to be, and will continue to be as long as, I guess, people are quilting.
I'm sure you're right, and there's so many different uses for them. Thanks so much for bringing these today to show us.
This new product presentation with Hollis Turnbow has been brought to you by Quilts Plus, the only complete source for all your quilting and other heirloom sewing supplies.
Now I'm going to show you how to cut a continuous bias from a square of fabric. This square fabric is about 24 inches square, and if you can believe it, this is going to give us a piece of 1.5 inch bias binding that is 422 inches long. I don't know how it does it, it's just magic. First we want to find a diagonal, and we're going to cut it on the diagonal, and I have pressed this so that I can tell where this diagonal is. And I'm just going to fold it up one more time. Now that is our bias cut. Remember, originally this was laying like this. Now I'm going to take this piece and put it underneath. And of course we want right sides together. And we're going to make a seam. This is the straight of grain here, and my bias cuts are going this way. I'm going to hold this up for you. I always like to call this the magic M. It does look sort of like an M, doesn't it? Now let me stitch this seam, and I'll show you what we do next. And you can use 1/4 inch seam allowances or not. I'm using a little bit wider. Place this down. You would press this seam open, and on this edge right here I'm going to place my ruler at 1.5 inches and cut up about 5 or 6 inches. Now that's the beginning of our 1.5 inch cut. Next, I'm going to turn this over so that our seam is down, and of course, play like we've pressed this seam. We're going to fold this way. We're going to fold this way. And again, we're going to stitch so that this is what we'll have. And you can see that this is going to now be a cylinder. So once we have that stitched, once we have that stitched, then we're going to begin cutting our continuous bias. And this is really a fun process. Before you get this out from under your sewing machine foot, it just looks like a mess. So if it looks like a mess, you know you've got it right. And I do like to have both of these seams pressed before I start cutting. Now, you can see that this is where we have started our cut right here. And I have a piece already prepared and pressed that I'm going to show you how we continue doing the cutting. Actually, I have used a smaller Omni mat, and I've put it over the end of my little ironing board here. And as you can see, this is my 1.5 inch edge that I've started. And I'm just going to continue cutting this around until we get tired of watching it being cut. And just keep moving it around. And this little Omni mat, this little tiny one, is the perfect size for that. And we're just going to continue cutting all the way around until we're finished. Now look at this wonderful pile of continuous bias that we have. And this is now ready to bind a quilt. I like to just roll it up in a roll so that it doesn't get all wrinkled and set it aside until I'm ready to put it on my quilt. I want to show you one other ruler that is real important. This is our 12.5-inch square. Most of my quilts that I make are using a 12.5-inch square. And we hope that when our square is finished, it's 12.5 inches, and this is the moment of truth. We can place our 12.5-inch square ruler over the top, and if there were any excess hanging out, any little tails or anything, we can just trim them off and trim our square down to size. When you're making a quilt, all the squares need to be the same size or they won't go together correctly. This square also comes in a 15-inch size for those of you who like to work with larger squares. So you can see we have just a lot of different options available with the cutting mat, the rotary cutter, and the Omni Grid rulers. They all work together and it makes our quilting much easier.
Stay with us. Sharon will be right back.
I hope you've enjoyed today's show on tips, tricks, and techniques for rotary cutting. As you can see, with the use of our rotary cutter, our cutting mats, rotary cutting rulers, squares, and triangles, we can really speed up the once tedious process of cutting out quilts. An added advantage is the increased accuracy of our cutting as well. With strip piecing techniques, many of the delicate bias cuts can be handled with ease. As you know, when your pieces are accurately cut, they will go together much nicer. There is no substitute for accuracy in cutting and piecing. Let's stay on the cutting edge of quilting with these tips, tricks, and techniques for rotary cutting. I've enjoyed visiting with you. I hope you'll continue to tune in to Heirlooms by Designs. In the coming weeks, we have many exciting techniques to show you. They'll range from quilting, French machine sewing, and English smocking to machine embroidery techniques. And all of them will be Heirlooms by Design.
Heirlooms by Design has been brought to you by Capital Imports, by OmniGrid, and by Quilts Plus. If you'd like more information on the supplies and techniques used in today's show, then drop us a note to Quilts Plus, 1211 Noble Street, Anniston, Alabama 36201. That's Quilts Plus, 1211 Noble Street, Anniston, Alabama 36201. Sharon will be back with more Heirlooms by Design next week.